Imagine this. A new nation, right? It's just been born out of colonial rule, torn apart by partition, and it's facing this monumental task.
Right.
How do you weave together democratic ideals, things from all over the world, and this incredibly deep social complexity into one single legal document? I mean, the sheer scale of that, the intellectual challenge, just staggering.
It absolutely is. And, for anyone listening, especially if you're preparing for the UPSC exam, this isn't just history. It's not just some old story.
Yeah.
This is the foundational architecture. Every single policy, every legal protection we have today, it all goes back to the making of this document. It's essential knowledge.
And that deep dive into that architecture, that's exactly our mission today. We're going to be using the definitive roadmap and Laxmikanth's text, Chapter 2, The Making of the Constitution. This is based on the 8th edition. And we're going to break it all down, making those connections you absolutely need for your preparation.
But before we get, fully into the sources, we just want to take a moment. This kind of deep, rigorous content is only possible because of a whole ecosystem of support.
That's right.
This deep dive is brought to you by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. And honestly, your active support is what keeps this going. It's vital.
It really is. So if you haven't already, please take a second, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit that bell notification so you never miss one of these analyses.
And we'd humbly ask you to like this video, or audio if you're listening that way. And please drop a valuable comment below. Let us know what constitutional concept really stood out to you.
And this is a big one. If you're in a position to, and you find this content genuinely helps your prep, please consider joining the paid membership on YouTube.
We have to give a huge, sincere shout out and thank you to all our existing members. Your support is what literally powers this content creation. It lets us spend the time to get this right, to go deep. We really, truly couldn't do it without you.
We've also got all your study material sorted out. So remember, you can get free notes that summarize this entire deep dive, plus practice previous year questions, or PYQs, right now on our Telegram channel.
And for those of you who are really aiming for that top tier, for our legend YouTube members, we've got premium notes, extra high-value PYQs, and even model mains answers. That's all on our exclusive Discord channel, so please join us there for those enhanced resources.
Okay, with all that said, let's set the mission. We're going to summarize the core framework, tracing the whole journey from those colonial laws that kind of laid the foundation.
The scaffolding, really.
Exactly, the scaffolding. Right through to the Constituent Assembly, and then we'll dissect the big pillars. The Preamble, fundamental rights, the whole federalism debate, and the system of checks and balances.
Let's do it. So, where do we begin? I think we have to start with that institutional inheritance. The Constitution didn't just appear out of nowhere in 1947.
Right, it was built on something. It
was built on a century of British legal frameworks. Our sources are very clear that these pre-1947 acts, they laid the, and I'm quoting, legal framework for organization and functioning of government.
And we often jump straight to the big ones, like the 1935 Act. But some of those earlier acts, they show a slow, creeping change, don't they? Like the Charter Act of 1813.
Yes, exactly. On the surface, the 1813 Act looks purely economic, but it was a massive signal. It officially abolished the trade monopoly of the East India Company in India.
So the British Parliament was basically saying this is too big for one company now.
Precisely. Indian trade was too lucrative, so they threw it open to all British merchants. Now, the company did keep its monopoly on tea and the China trade for a bit longer, but this was a huge step. It's a classic case of economic policy forcing a political shift.
Okay, so fast forward a few decades and we get to the Charter Act of 1853. The source calls this a constitutional landmark. What makes it so important?
Because it's the first time you see the seed of a modern parliament being planted in India. It separated, for the very first time, the legislative and the executive functions of the Governor-General's Council.
So before 1853, it was just one big body doing everything.
Yes, a monolithic body. This act created a separate Governor-General's Legislative Council, which people started calling a mini-parliament.
Ah. So lawmaking became its own special thing, a special function, as the text says, not just an administrative order.
Exactly. It required special procedures, debate. It set a precedent for institutional specialization that, a century later becomes the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. It's a direct line of institutional DNA.
Then, of course, the Revolt of 1857 happens, which changes everything. The British realized they can't just rule by force.
They need some buy-in, some cooperation.
Right.
And that's what leads to the Indian Councils Act of 1861.
the policy of association.
That's the one. It was a tactical move to bring Indians into the lawmaking process, even if it was just through nomination. It was about making the system look a little more consultative.
And the first nominees in 1862 were the Raja of Benares, the Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinka Rao. Now, these are non-official members nominated by the Viceroy. From today's perspective, how representative was that, really?
Not at all in a democratic sense. It was representative in name only. The goal was to tap into elite Indian opinion to, avoid another revolt.
Right.
But for a UPSC student, the key takeaway is that the idea of a consultative body, a principle that's essential for federalism later on, was first planted right here, even if it was for purely colonial reasons.
So this slow, often reluctant evolution eventually brings us to the big one, the blueprint. The Simon Commission.
Well, the Simon Commission itself was a disaster politically. Appointed in 1927, 2 years early, and it was an all-British commission to decide India's future.
Which, of course, led to a total boycott.
A universal boycott. But its report in 1930 was incredibly influential. It recommended abolishing diarchy, extending responsible government in the provinces, and crucially, establishing a federation of British India and the princely states.
And that report, plus the roundtable conferences and the white paper, all led to the Government of India Act of 1935.
The behemoth. The 1935 Act. If you look at our Constitution today, the Federalists, the emergency provisions, the structure of the judiciary, the office of the governor, it is shocking how much was lifted, sometimes word for word, from that 1935 Act. It's the single most important structural source.
Okay, so that colonial framework provided the scaffolding. Now let's get to the actual creation, the Constituent Assembly, formed under the Cabinet Mission Scheme of 1946. What was so unique about how this body was put together?
The key thing to remember is that it was a hybrid. It was a partly elected and partly nominated body.
It feels like a compromise.
It was a reflection of reality. You had the British Indian provinces, which could hold elections, and then you had the princely states, which were run by monarchs. So you needed a system for both.
And the election part, it wasn't universal adult suffrage, was it?
No, not at all. The members were indirectly elected by the provincial assemblies, and those assemblies themselves were elected on a very limited franchise based on property, tax, education.
And the results from those elections in July, August 1946 were pretty telling.
Oh, yeah. The Indian National Congress won 208 of the 296 seats for the provinces. The Muslim League got 73. A clear picture of the political landscape at the time.
But what about the 93 seats for the princely states? They just sat empty at first.
They did. The princes were hesitant. They stayed away, not sure if they wanted to join this new democratic India. That only really changed after the Mountbatten Plan of June 3rd, 1947.
Once partition was a certainty.
Exactly. Once independence and partition were on the table, the princes had to pick a side. And one by one, their representatives started trickling into the Constituent Assembly.
And it's amazing, isn't it, that despite being indirectly elected, despite partition, the final assembly was this incredible cross-section of India. You had Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis, Anglo-Indians, SCs, STs, even 15 women members.
It's a huge point of strength. It gave the document immense legitimacy. But, and this is a classic trivia point and an important one, the most significant absence was Mahatma Gandhi.
He wasn't a member.
No. His spirit was everywhere, his ideas were debated constantly, but he chose to stay outside the formal process, focusing on trying to heal the wounds of partition.
So once the assembly's in place, the sheer amount of work required committees. Lots of them.
You couldn't do it any other way. You needed to specialize. And the most critical of all of them was, without a doubt, the drafting committee.
Set up on August 29, 1947.
Yes, chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. It had 7 members, and their job was basically to be the architects. They took all the principles and resolutions from the assembly and turned them into a coherent legal draft. They were the engine room.
But other committees played key roles too, right? Like
Yeah.
the one Nehru chaired.
The special committee to examine the draft constitution, yes. That was an oversight role, making sure the draft matched the big philosophical goals. And you even had a press gallery committee under Usha Nath Sen to manage transparency with the public. It was a very well-oiled, multi-layered machine.
Okay, so that's the structure. Let's move to the soul of the thing, the preamble.
The ideological core. It's what sets out the entire vision.
And that language. It's so powerful. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic.
Right.
It just lays it all out there. Justice, liberty, equality.
It really does. And its roots are in the objective resolution that Nehru moved way back in 1946. But for you, as a serious student, the really interesting part is the legal fight over the preamble status.
Right. Is it actually part of the Constitution or just a nice introduction, a classic PYQ?
Exactly. And originally, in the Berubari Union case in 1960, the Supreme Court said it was not a part of the Constitution.
Just a key to the minds of the makers.
Yes, useful for interpretation if a clause was ambiguous, but it had no legal teeth on its own. That was the initial, very restrictive view.
But then came the landmark Kesavananda Bharati case in 1973.
A game changer. The Supreme Court did a complete U-turn. It said emphatically that the preamble is a part of the Constitution, and it can be amended, but, and this is the crucial part, as long as the amendment doesn't destroy the basic structure.
And that just cemented its place. It's not just philosophy, it's foundational law. Which leads us to this idea of constitutionalism.
Constitutionalism is just the fancy word for limited government. It's the opposite of arbitrary rule. It's the idea that the government itself is bound by the law.
So it's about putting effective restraints upon governmental action, as Friedrich put it.
Exactly. And every single thing we're about to discuss, fundamental rights, judicial review, they're all mechanisms to enforce that very idea.
Okay, let's get into the most direct enforcement mechanism then. The fundamental rights in Part 3, starting with the big one, equality and reservation. Articles 14, 15, and 16.
Article 14 is the foundation. It promises two things. First, equality before law, a British concept, meaning nobody is above the law. It's a negative concept.
And second,
Equal protection of laws. This is an American concept, and it's positive. It means the state can treat unequals differently. It allows for what's called reasonable classification.
and that's the justification for affirmative action for reservation policies.
Precisely. Article 15 then builds on that, banning discrimination based on religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth.
And it's not just the state, is it? Article 15 goes further.
It does. It also prohibits discrimination by private individuals when it comes to accessing public spaces, shops, restaurants, wells, roads. It's about ensuring social equality, not just legal equality.
The reservation policy itself has evolved so much, we have to talk about the 103rd Amendment in 2019, the EWS reservation.
That was a big shift. For the first time, it introduced a 10% reservation based purely on economic criteria for economically weaker sections. It was separate from the existing caste-based reservations.
And that applied to education and public jobs, but not minority institutions.
Correct. And this runs parallel to the other major development, which was the judicial clarification on OBC reservation in the Indrasani case in 1992.
The Mandel Commission case. This is where the creamy layer concept comes from.
That's the one. The Supreme Court said the 27% reservation for other backward classes was constitutionally valid, which was huge, but it added a critical condition. The creamy layer, the advanced sections within the OBCs, had to be excluded.
Because the benefit is meant for the most backward, not those who have already advanced.
Exactly. It's a way to ensure the tool of reservation remains targeted and effective, balancing the different ideas of equality.
Okay, let's move to probably the most dynamic right of them all. Article 21, the right to life and liberty. Understanding its evolution is just. It's crucial.
It is the heart of modern Indian law. Initially, the Supreme Court had a very narrow view. In the A.K. Gopalan case in 1950, they looked at the phrase procedure established by law.
Right. No person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law.
And they interpreted that very literally. They said it only protects you from arbitrary executive action. If Parliament passed a law, no matter how unfair, that was the procedure established by law, and the courts couldn't question its fairness.
So it was a very weak protection, basically.
For almost 30 years, yes. It was nothing like the American due process of law, where the law itself has to be fair.
But then the Menaka Gandhi case in 1978 happened.
And it changed everything. It completely overruled the Gopalan view. The court said that any procedure must be fair, just, and reasonable. It has to pass the test of Articles 14 and 19.
So it basically imported the spirit of due process into Article 21.
It did, and that one judgment unlocked the door. It transformed Article 21 from a minor clause into this huge umbrella for a whole host of rights.
And that list just keeps growing.
It does. The Supreme Court has since declared that Article 21 includes the right to live with human dignity, the right to a decent environment, which is the basis for almost all environmental law in India, the right to livelihood, shelter, health.
Right to privacy, which was a huge one recently.
A monumental one, overruling older judgments, and even the right to free education up to 14 years. It all flows from that expansive reading of life and liberty.
Let's touch on a more controversial feature before we move on. Article 22, preventive detention.
This is a really unique feature of our Constitution. As the sources point out, no other major democracy has prevented detention detaining someone without a trial, as an integral part of its Constitution.
It seems so counterintuitive. The framers had just fought a freedom struggle against a colonial power that used these very laws. Why include it?
Context is everything. They were dealing with the trauma of partition, communal riots, deep internal security threats. They saw it as a necessary evil, a pragmatic compromise to protect the fragile new state.
So they kept the tool, but tried to put some safeguards around it, like review by an advisory board.
Exactly. You can see its lineage from colonial laws like the Bengal Regulation of 1818, right up to modern laws like UAPA. It remains this point of constant tension between individual liberty and state security.
Okay, so from those enforceable rights, let's shift to the guiding stars of the Constitution. The directive principles of state policy, or DPSPs.
The DPSPs in Part 4 are the moral compass. They lay out the vision of a welfare state, moving beyond the colonial police state. They are, as the book says, a comprehensive economic, social, and political program.
But, and this is the big but, they are non-justiciable. You can't go to court to enforce them.
Correct. Article 37 says they are fundamental in the governance of the country, but they aren't legally enforceable. And this led to some very sharp criticism back in the day.
I remember the famous quotes. K.T. Shaw called them pious superfluities.
He did. And he also compared them to a check on a bank, payable only when the resources of the bank permit. K.C. Ware called them a moral homily.
So the critique is that they're all talk, no action. But in practice, that's not really true, is it? Their implementation has been massive.
Not at all. Look at the practical impact. The first thing that happened was sweeping land reform laws across the country, abolishing zamindars, reforming tenancy. That was a direct implementation of the DPSP goal to prevent the concentration of wealth.
And what about institutions?
The Planning Commission, set up in 1950, and its successor, the NETI Ayog, were created explicitly to carry out the DPSP mandate of plan development. Laws like the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 come from Article 48A. The push for SC/ST welfare comes from Article 46. They have been incredibly influential.
Okay, now let's tackle the big design tension in the Indian state. Federalism versus a strong center. Article 1 calls India a union of states, not a federation.
That wording was very deliberate. It signals two critical things. First, the Indian Union isn't the result of a contract between the states, unlike the USA.
The states didn't create the union.
Exactly. And second, and more importantly, no state has the right to secede. That phrase, union of states, immediately signals a bias towards the center.
We do have federal features, like a dual government, a written constitution.
We do, an independent judiciary, division of powers. But the unitary or non-federal features are incredibly strong, and some would say dominant.
Such as?
A strong center, a single constitution for everyone, single citizenship, the All India Services IAS, IPS, who are recruited by the center but work in the states, the center appointing the state governor. The list goes on.
And the most dramatic example of this is the idea of an indestructible union of destructible states.
That's a critical phrase to remember. It means that Parliament can, on its own, with a simple majority, change the map of India. It can alter the boundaries, the name, the area of any state. The states themselves are not permanent entities.
Which is completely different from a classic federation like the U.S.
Completely. It gives the center immense power over the very existence of the states.
And within this structure, we have special provisions for tribal areas, like the Fifth Schedule. The source links this to a very contemporary problem.
Yes, Article 244 and the Fifth Schedule are designed to protect tribal autonomy and resources. But the analysis points out that the non-implementation of these provisions is a major factor in the growth of left-wing extremism.
So when the constitutional promises of protection and autonomy are not met,
it creates alienation, a sense of injustice, and that becomes fertile ground for insurgency. It's a direct link between constitutional design and a national security challenge.
And for dealing with crises like that, the Constitution has the emergency provisions where it can become fully unitary.
This is the ultimate safety valve. A national emergency under Article 352 is the most powerful. But its use, or rather misuse, in the 1970s led to some major changes.
The 44th Amendment in 1978, what did it do?
It put in serious checks and balances. Now, a proclamation has to be approved by both houses within 1 month, not 2. And it only lasts for 6 months at a time, needing fresh approval to continue. It took away the power of indefinite extension by the executive.
And the judiciary also stepped in, didn't it? The Minerva Mills case.
Hugely important. The Minerva Mills judgment in 1980 established that an emergency proclamation is subject to judicial review. It can be struck down if it's found to be malified or based on completely irrelevant facts.
So even in an emergency, the judiciary remains the guardian.
The ultimate guardian. And on fundamental rights, the 44th Amendment also added a crucial safeguard. While Article 19 rights get suspended, it made it clear that Articles 20 and 21, protection against conviction and right to life, can never be suspended.
A non-negotiable line.
A line in the sand based on bitter experience.
And what about President's Rule, Article 356? That's the most common and politically charged one.
It is. It allows the center to take over a state government if the constitutional machinery fails. But its history is filled with allegations of misuse for political reasons.
The Sarkaria Commission had a lot to say about that.
It did. It criticized its use in cases where, say, a state's ruling party loses the national election but still has a majority in the state assembly, or when there's a vague internal disturbance. The Commission's main point was that Article 356 must be a weapon of last resort, not a political tool.
Okay, let's shift from crisis management to day-to-day governance, the parliamentary system.
Right. So we have this fundamental split. The president is the nominal executive, the head of state, ceremonial, constitutional.
While the prime minister is the real executive, the head of government, the one with the actual power.
And this was very intentional. Dr. Ambedkar herself said that if you want to compare anyone in our system to the U.S. president in terms of real power, it's the prime minister, not the president of India.
The Constitution says the president appoints the PM, but that's mostly a formality, right, based on convention.
Mostly. The convention is the president has to invite the leader of the majority party in the Lok Sabha. But presidential discretion kicks in when things are messy.
Like a hung parliament.
Exactly. If no party has a clear majority, the president has to make a judgment call. We saw that in 1979 when President Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy appointed Charan Singh. It's a limited but vital power in times of instability.
We should also quickly clarify the difference between the Council of Ministers and the Cabinet. People use them interchangeably.
They do, but they're very different. The Council of Ministers is the whole team, everyone. Cabinet ministers, ministers of state, deputy ministers. It's a large body.
And the Cabinet?
The Cabinet is the inner circle. The top-tier ministers with the most important portfolios. They are the chief policy formulating body, the real core of the executive. And the whole system works on collective responsibility. They swim or sink together.
Okay, let's look at how Parliament keeps that executive in check.
Yeah.
Let's talk about motions.
There are several types. You have a substantive motion for big, important stuff like impeaching the president or removing the chief election commissioner.
But the ones that really test the government's strength are the censure motion and the no confidence motion. What's the key difference?
It's crucial. A censure motion can be against a single minister or a group. It has to state the specific reasons for the censure, a policy failure, for example. If it passes, it's a major embarrassment, but they don't have to resign.
And a no confidence motion.
That's the nuclear option. It's against the entire Council of Ministers. It needs no reason to be stated, and if it passes, the government falls. They have to resign, period.
Another key parliamentary mechanism is the joint sitting, Article 108, for breaking deadlocks.
Yes, when the two houses just can't agree on a bill. One rejects it, or they disagree on amendments, or 6 months pass. The president can call a joint sitting to resolve it. And because the Lok Sabha has more members, it usually gets its way.
But crucially, where can a joint sitting not be used?
This is a key point for your exam. It only applies to ordinary bills or financial bills. Never for money bills, the Lok Sabha has the final say there, and never for constitutional amendment bills. Those have to be passed by each house separately with a special majority.
And it's not just theoretical. It has been used 3 times.
Only 3 times. The Dowry Prohibition Bill in 1960, the Banking Service Commission Repeal Bill in 1977, and the POTA Bill in 2002.
And while the Lok Sabha has that dominance, the Rajya Sabha has its own special powers that highlight its federal character.
Absolutely. The Rajya Sabha, as the Council of States, can do 3 things the Lok Sabha can't. It can authorize Parliament to make a law on a state list subject. It can authorize the creation of a new all-India service. And it alone can start the process to remove the vice president. These are its unique federal powers.
Okay, final pillar, the judiciary. We have an integrated judicial system, not a dual one like the U.S.
That's right. One hierarchy of courts, with the Supreme Court at the top enforcing both central and state laws. a direct borrowing from the 1935 Act. And this system is protected by strong safeguards for judicial independence.
Like the appointment process.
The collegium system, the idea that judges are appointed by the executive, but in consultation with the senior judiciary itself to limit political interference.
And that system was at the center of a huge controversy with the NJAC.
A massive constitutional showdown. The 99th Amendment in 2014 tried to replace the collegium with a National Judicial Appointments Commission, or NJAC, which would have given the government a bigger say.
But the Supreme Court struck it down.
In the fourth judge's case in 2015, yes. They declared the amendment unconstitutional, arguing that it violated the principle of judicial independence, which they said was part of the basic structure of the Constitution, a huge assertion of judicial power.
And that power is called judicial review, the idea that the Constitution is supreme.
Exactly. Unlike Britain, where Parliament is supreme, here the courts are the sentinel on the qui-vive, the watchful guardians. Under Article 13, they can strike down any law that violates the Constitution.
And they use specific tools for this, like the doctrine of severability.
Right, which means if only one part of a law is unconstitutional, they can just sever that part and let the rest of the law stand. It's a surgical approach.
And the most powerful tool of all, the basic structure doctrine.
The ultimate check. From the Kesavananda Bharati case, Parliament can amend the Constitution, but it cannot destroy its essential features, its basic structure. Things like democracy, secularism, federalism, judicial review itself. It's the final lock on the Constitution.
Finally, let's talk about how access to the courts has changed through judicial activism and PIL.
The old rule was locus standi. Only the person directly affected could go to court. Public interest litigation, or PIL, blew that rule apart.
It allowed anyone to file a case on behalf of those who couldn't, right? The poor, the marginalized.
Exactly, any public-spirited citizen. And this led to a phase of judicial activism where courts started interpreting laws creatively to deliver justice, often filling gaps left by the legislature.
But there's a fine line there.
A very fine line. The courts themselves have warned against it becoming judicial adventurism, where judges start running the government. It's a constant balancing act between protecting rights and respecting the separation of powers.
So wrapping this all up, this has been a deep dive into a framework that is just this incredible mix of pragmatism, of borrowing from other systems, and this radical commitment to justice and equality.
And it's not a static document. We've seen how it's constantly been shaped and reshaped by judicial interpretation, especially that huge expansion of Article 21. We've seen the tensions in its federal design and the powerful checks and balances that hold it all together.
So let's leave you with one final thought to mull over, one that really gets to the heart of this tension. Given that the basic structure doctrine stops Parliament from fundamentally changing the rules, and doctrines like severability allow the judiciary to fine-tune laws,
and considering that the whole point, the whole promise of the DPSPs was to tackle deep socioeconomic challenges, poverty, land reform, inequality, the big question is this: how effective is this current balance between a powerful legislature and an even more powerful judiciary in actually delivering on those original socioeconomic goals?
Is this system now better at protecting political rights than it is at engineering the massive economic transformation the framers dreamed of?
That's the question that sits at the very core of the Indian polity today.
A question to drive your thinking. If this deep dive was useful for your UPSC preparation, please do us a favor and like this episode right now and share a comment. Let us know what you learned.
And if you really value this kind of in-depth content, please support us. Subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel, and if you're able, join the YouTube membership.
Don't forget, all the free notes and PYQs are waiting for you on Telegram, and the premium resources for our Legend members are on Discord. Do join us there.
And one last time, thank you to all our existing members. Your support means the world. We wish you the very best in mastering this foundational subject.